Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and speech writing needs. I am delighted to be joined today by Shawn Slevin. We're going to be discussing water safety and the need to develop a new relationship with water. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits, as well as high net worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Hello, Bruce. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Please take a moment or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. My name is Shawn Slevin, and I am the executive director and the founder of an organization called Swim Strong Foundation. We are a 501c3 in New York City, and our mission is to reduce drowning and water-based accidents and keep people safe in and around the water. Do that in a number of ways. The two primary are traditional in-water learn to swim lessons, and then something that's a little less traditional, in-person teaching of water safety, and what has evolved into what I call a revolutionary approach to water safety, which Bruce and I will share with you, a program called Know Before You Go. And all of this was the genesis of my work for 4 decades as a competitive swim coach, not only teaching speed and stamina, but also, perhaps more importantly, life lessons that transcend the pool around self-discipline, goal setting, resiliency, teamwork, all of the things that help a young person through their academics, through their career, through raising their family, schoolroom to boardroom.
When should someone be taught how to swim?
Oh, that's very dependent upon the individual. There are some people that put a child in the water before, their first birthday. There are others who don't go near the water, have some sort of fear, and fear can be passed down through families, actually, and never want to get into the water. So it's a very personal and individual situation.
How do you overcome fear?
So I myself was actually the victim of a near drowning incident. I was 5 at the time. My mom and I were at a lake. I knew I didn't know how to swim. She allowed me just to go to the edge and put my feet, in the water and walk along the shoreline. She was reading a magazine or whatever she was doing. And I, like the imp I was, went in a little bit more than I should have. And I fell into a hole.
Ooh.
Very unexpected. Very unexpected. I wasn't even at my knees, so it was totally unexpected. But I couldn't find the bottom. I couldn't find the top.
I expected you to say that the tide came in. I didn't expect a hole.
No, it was a hole. And so fortunately, my mom did see me, and she, scooped me out and, of course, warmed my bottom sufficiently as to have disobeyed her very specific instructions. But it was.
You wanted to say that she dried you off.
Yeah, she dried me off very well. But it really was a traumatic experience. I wouldn't go near the water for 4 years. Dad finally convinced me to come in. And at that time, there was a woman who started a girls' swim team in our community in Woodside, Queens. Her name is Helen Coyne. And she needed a lot of girls to start this swim program. And so we had a tryout, and I thought I knew how to swim. I get into the water, I start splashing around. Of course, I couldn't swim. She literally grabbed me by the back of the suit, kind of threw me to the other end of the pool and said, okay, you're in. The only reason I was in was because she needed the bodies. But the interesting point of that was in 6 months, I actually was competing. So she did see something there, although hard to imagine what she could have seen. But she did become a mentor of mine over the years, and she taught me really all there was to know about competitive swimming and how one develops children to become competitive swimmers, how one approaches the meets and the strategy behind that. She was a wonderful mentor, and she volunteered for 22 years in our community, and I took the program over when she retired. I brought the boys program in as well, so I had a 40-year career as a volunteer swim coach. Very successful program in Woodside, Queens.
Human beings are 75% water.
Yes.
So do we have a natural affinity, I guess would be the word, for the water?
I totally believe so. And actually some claim, and I think this is true also, that in our history, eons ago, we came from water. So that combination is very powerful. And I do believe we are often drawn to water. I know myself, even without going into the water, if I am near a body of water, I find myself decompressing and relaxing. My shoulders that were up to my ears start to relax and go back down to the level they should be at. It's just so peaceful. It's so calming near the water. And the other interesting thing about the water is that we all go to it expecting a good outcome. We have in our head the idea that our experiences around the water are always positive, until perhaps they're not.
I am not going to do this story justice because it would take too long, but you reminded me, I had friends, still have them, originally from Scotland.
Yes.
And their youngest was not born in Scotland. She was actually born in Canada. And I told her the story of the Loch Ness monster.
Yes.
And of course, my version of the story as that Nessie is alive and well, and I don't remember what I told her. That protects little girls and eats fishermen. I don't know. I could have told her anything. And she loved the story. And then she went over to her father and she said, Bruce just told me about the Loch Ness monster. And the first question she asked was whether or not lake in Scottish was really Loch. And when he said yes, that gave credibility to the entire story. And then she said, oh, so the Loch Ness monster really exists. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and the question was, what was he going to do? And he said, well, Bruce believes it, and if you want to believe Bruce, you can believe Bruce. And she said, well, do you believe Bruce? And he said, very rarely. She started to laugh. But she was mature enough. And I forget why in the world I told that story. But let's get to what's important here. Before the interview began, I said to you, half facetiously, you got these idiots that put up a above ground pool in the summer, and they don't bother to put a fence around their property. One would think that that would be a major source of drowning because there's no lifeguard and you've got parents who frankly are idiots, all right? what are, in fact, the greatest dangers of drowning? And is there a difference between children and adults?
So let's take a step back and look at the global picture for a moment. A person dies every 70 seconds due to drowning. For every death, there's 5 more instances of life-altering body changes, accident due to accidents and water-based accidents, brain and spinal cord related. So in the United States, our average daily rate is 10 people dying per day, with the commensurate 50 people with the brain and spinal cord injuries due to the water-based accidents. Children under the age of 14, it's the second leading cause of death for them. It is the leading cause of death for children under the age of 5. With most of those children dying at home. Their outdoor swimming pool is certainly one of those issues, particularly if it is not properly fenced. And we speak about layers, plural, of protection. So a fence is not the only one, but certainly that is one definite one. But even indoors. So you might tend to think of a bathtub, and you would be right. But who would think that it could be so much fun to throw your toy in the toilet bowl and then go to retrieve it? Toddlers love to do this. And the heaviest part of a toddler's body is their head. So if they do get upended and no one sees them, they cannot right themselves. It only takes 2 minutes and 2 inches for any of us to die, adult or child, due to drowning. 2 and 2.
I didn't think of toilets. I don't know why. It sort of, I realized where you were going. For me, I was babysitting, and the child was an infant, and the father asked me if I'd be willing to give the daughter a bath. Now, if the daughter was older, I would have said no, but we're talking about an infant. So I didn't think that there could be any, accusations of impropriety, that anybody would think anything was wrong. We're talking about an infant. And I'm looking at this bassinet, and I said, she could actually drown in this. If I were to turn around and pick up the phone, the water's deep enough if she slid down.
Or worse, or maybe you can't see it, I'm just holding up the phone. That's one of our worst distractors now, is our cell phone.
This was before cell phones. If it had been a cell phone, it wouldn't have been a problem, because this phone would have been right beside me. I would have been beside her. But the phone was on the wall wherever. And as soon as I said that, the mother, who was not exactly enamored by the idea of a male university student babysitting, as soon as I said that, she said, "Fine, we're going. You can handle everything. That's okay." I won her over unintentionally. But you've got the bassinet, you've got the toilet, you've got the bathtub, you've got the pool.
Buckets. Buckets are the same problem. And I'll give you one that surprised me. I hadn't thought of it. A large dog's water bowl.
Never in a million years. If we were doing this until the cows came home, I wouldn't have thought of that one. But what I thought you were going to say was children playing in the street. Maybe they turn on the
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 pump.
the fire hydrant.
Yes.
And in the community where I live, every winter, the city comes around and provides us with an assortment of potholes,
Yes.
which they will be filling up shortly. But in the meantime, some of these potholes are kind of big. And if you only need 3 inches of water, and it's 2 inches of water, that's also a possibility.
Could be.
Have this enormous everything from swimming pools to toilet bowls to buckets.
And distraction is the key issue, Bruce. I mean, you raised this before. It's so easy for us now to be distracted for one reason or another. Anything, when you're around children and water, eyes must be on the child all the time. You can even, at a party, for example, designate, just like you would designate a driver, to not be drinking, you designate a water watcher at the pool, or wherever you are around water, for 15 minutes. And that person does nothing but watch those children near water. Doesn't eat, doesn't drink, doesn't get on the phone, doesn't have a conversation with a colleague or a friend. They're simply watching the children by the water. And then somebody taps them on the shoulder and they relieve them. And this way, everybody enjoys the party. Those children are safe.
I was going to ask, given all the multitude of different dangers, adults should know what to do, and you just gave one example, probably the most important one. How do you teach water safety to children?
So there's a number of things. I'd like to talk a little bit about Know Before You Go, because this program that we developed takes a little different slant.
I'm not trying to be funny.
No.
When you say know before you go, how do you spell know?
K-N-O-W. K-N-O-W. Yeah.
Because I could see K-N-O-W and I could see N-O.
Yes.
So that's why I
yes.
Oh, seriously.
So the reality is that our world is changing around us due to climate change. Our water levels have been rising anywhere from 1 inch to 1.5 inches over the past 12 to 15 years. What that is causing is flooding in areas that we never saw flooding before. Have you ever heard of the expression sunny day flooding?
No, I've heard of, and I've seen cloud bursts with the sun shining. I don't think that's the same thing. Now, I wasn't trying to be funny. Sunny day, beautiful outside, not a cloud in the sky apparently, and torrential downpour.
No rain at all. It has to do with a high tide, one of the super high tides, that because our water levels have risen to the height they are now, there's much more of the surge than there used to be before. So the water is pushed up higher. It has no place to go. So it's now coming up onto roads that were never flooded before. And where nobody expects to see water covering the road. So this is an issue. We in New York, where I live, we never really had to worry about flooding. That was something for the rest of the country to be particularly concerned about in the spring, as everything started to melt and the runoff would hit the rivers, and the rivers would overflow their banks, et cetera, et cetera. But that became an issue. And then naturally, if you observed our storms, our tropical storms and hurricanes over the last several years, I'm sure you've seen that those have become stronger, not weaker. And that actually, if you remember last year, we had to go into the Greek alphabet to continue to name them. We had so many storms, right? So it's increasing in strength. The storms are increasing in numbers, but yet decreasing in the time between the storms. So communities are getting hit harder and more often with less time to recover. in between storms. So that's becoming a problem as well. And then in our city, as well as many, many places, we have the trifecta of our waterfronts being developed as never before in my lifetime. And so the good thing about that is it's opening up access to open water to all of our citizens. If you have the knowledge of that particular body of water and you understand its nature, and you have swimming skills to help you safely navigate it, you're golden. But most people don't have the knowledge of the type of water that they're thinking of going into, nor do they have the swimming skills. So we know that our drowning rates, and again, the water-based accident rates, are going to skyrocket. So this program, Know Before You Go, really, the genesis of that was thinking about all of these things, seeing the world change, and trying to say, how can we help everybody, even if they choose not to learn how to swim? How can we help people be safe in, on, and around the water? And
That's
so
why I thought it might be no N-O, as in no cell phone. There you go. And I can't think of another example. But
no swimming if there's no lifeguard.
oh, that's my favorite, because I used to teach a course on entrepreneurship. And one of the questions, or one of the issues we dealt with, was ethics. True story, I think it was in Florida. There was a beach that had 4 different sections, all adjacent, A, B, C, D. And F didn't have a lifeguard. And the company was given a contract for A, B, C, and D. And there were 4 lifeguards, and the lifeguard at D, which was adjacent to E, was told, you don't go into E for any reason whatsoever. Period. End of discussion. Big sign, no swimming, no lifeguard, at your own risk. Simple. Well, somebody started to drown in E. The lifeguard from D notified the lifeguard adjacent to him, and he, the one from D, went into E, saved the man's life, and was then fired. And he was fired because he violated the terms of the contract. It could have cost the company the contract, and then everybody would have been unemployed. But he saved a man's life. So after he was fired, there was all the press coverage, and he got his job back. But I don't think he took it, but he got his job back. But that's also just a matter of, are you acquainted with the Darwin Awards?
No.
If you ever have to fly somewhere, go into the bookstore, the humor section, find the Darwin Awards. These are awards that are given for people for improving the human race by removing their DNA from it. Okay? And the stories are all true. They're all hysterical, but they're not very funny. My favorite is the mother, and it's a horrible story because her husband was there, her children were there. They were on a safari, one of these park safaris. Stay in your car, do not leave your car, do not feed the animals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There was a lioness who was nursing her cubs. One of the cubs wasn't hungry, and it was spoiling the photo. So the mother got out of the car, walked over to the cub, picked up the cub, and you know what happened next. So those are the types of stories. And you hear, you have them with swimming or with water as well. But there's one thing I want to touch upon, because we're dealing here with stupidity.
Well, but Bruce, just 1 second. Sure, go ahead.
We're dealing here with stupidity and with ignorance. all right? But there's one thing I want to make sure we touch on because we only have 5 minutes left. And you can have someone who's a swimmer, as good as you, if not better.
Absolutely.
And they are, and I can't swim, so I don't know if what I'm saying is true, but they're swimming out from the beach, and all of a sudden the riptide comes in, and you hear on the news that you swim with the riptide to get out of the riptide. But you've got to remember that. It's like driving. What do you do when your car starts to skid? Do you turn into the skid or out of the skid? Now, you know it when you're taking your driver's exam.
But you're not in the
But
situation.
now you're in the situation.
That's right.
So what do? How do you advise people? Because this is true, not just for swimming, this is true for everything. How do you advise people to overcome panic?
All right. So I'm going to address your question, but I'm coming at it a little circuitously.
However you want.
So our premise is that drowning is caused by 4 situations: a lack of understanding the environment, a lack of swimming skills, a lack of common sense, and a lack of good judgment. And Swim Strong can solve the first 2 issues. But if we could solve the latter 2 issues, we'd be richer than Bloomberg. We'd be able to fund all sorts of programming and things that we'd want to do. The latter 2 issues are really what you touched on in terms of, people not being their best selves, mentally as they approach a situation. But I think in some ways that's a little bit a part of our DNA, right? We always push the envelope. We do know that bad things can, and in fact do happen to other people until it happens to ourselves. So now moving to the panic situation. In our program, Know Before We Go, we are teaching you to understand the environment, about different types of water and the conditions to each of those waters, which is unique to themselves. If you understand what you're in, you're less likely to be panicked because you understand the nature of that water and what is going to be expected, therefore, by being in that water. That's how you combat it. It is education. I will share with you, I was a lifeguard, got caught in a rip current. It caught me unexpectedly. My first response, fight it. Wrong response. Didn't take me long before, it clicked in, everything that we just talked about clicked in, and I realized, and I made a different plan, and I was able to, remove myself safely. But that first reaction, that's just human, right? That's the human reaction. It is then be able to calm down, take the breath, and let the rest of your knowledge base kick in and guide you appropriately. But if you don't know, this is how so many people find themselves in trouble. And you remember the statistics I led off with in terms of how many people are dying. This is a global epidemic that we have that has been going on for over 100 years. The numbers are that high. And when you stop and think about that for a moment, and then realize that 95% of the drownings and water-based accidents were actually preventable, 95% preventable.
Mm-hmm.
Then you understand why it's so important to have the education.
I am reminded, and we'll end on this, you were talking about the water levels rising and water going where it hadn't before. This was before global warming and climate change. There was a flood. Floods have always happened.
Yes.
And this street turned into a torrential river. And the news crew was there. There was a car that was stuck. Woman got out of the car and she just went limp and floated over to the curb. and got up and started to walk, and she walked towards the camera crew, and the reporter said, "Why did you do that? You weren't swimming." She said, "I didn't have to swim. I knew that the force of the water would take me close enough that I'd be able to make it to the curb. There's no difference between this and getting stuck in a riptide or a powerful river that you're not expecting. Except," she said, "I didn't have to worry about the rapids." Now, this is a woman who I would want in the foxhole with me.
I'm amazed she was able to get out of the car if she was, because it's very difficult to open the door.
She didn't open the door.
She got out a window? Yeah.
She was the water had come from somewhere else. It wasn't raining, and her window was rolled down. So she was able to climb out through the window.
Lucky woman.
Before I let you go, I want you to please tell our viewers how they can get in touch, because what you do is very important, and no doubt many parents will want to take advantage of your services, your projects. So please.
So Shawn Slevin, Shawn.Slevin@swimstrongfoundation.org is the email address. The web address is www.swimstrongfoundation.org. And I am excited to tell you, Bruce, that we're coming into our 15th year, celebrating our 15th anniversary. And we have, to this date, taught more than 10,000 people how to swim. We've given more than $1 million in free swim lessons. We have taught about 9,000 people the Know Before You Go programming. And we have also initiated legislation to make mandatory water safety in schools in New York State. So we hope that bill will pass. If you are in New York City, New York State, please do reach out to your assembly person and your senator and ask for them to get behind those bills. Senate, it's S2207, and in the assembly, it's A728.
Usually, my last question is there anything that I haven't asked you that you wish I had asked, but you just answered it without my asking it. Shawn, thank you profusely for coming on. You have truly provided and are providing an important service. So thank you.
Bruce, thank you so much for allowing me to shine the light on this subject and for you being such a supporter of it. Thank you.
My pleasure. I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching. And as always, stay focused on success.